Welcome back, everybody. This is Brian, Ms. Berlin, and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
Hello.
Hey.
I emoted there. I actually put my hands out like, I was at a sideshow or a carnival or something. It's like, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, no. Anyway, so this is a interesting time for us to be recording Saturday morning at about noontime Pacific, which is 8 o'clock our guests' time currently. I think it's 8 o'clock. Daniel Cuthbert, welcome to the show. I'm going to go ahead and get us started here, and we're just going to get started because this might be a big show. So welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Right on. Maybe you could tell people a little bit about yourself and some of the topic that we're going to be talking about today. Sure.
I'm one of the project leaders of the OWASP Application Security Verification Project, or ASVS. I've been so since around 2014, version 2. We're now on version 4. But it's definitely a community project, so we just kind of steer the ship.
Right on. It's actually 7 o'clock his time, freaking time zones and daylight savings time being what it is. So, right on. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you do in your day job when you're not working for the OWASP, doing the ASVS stuff?
Sure. I'm the global head of research for a bank called Santander out of Spain.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I've definitely heard of Bank Santander. Not a small bank, of course.
No, she does well.
Very cool. Okay. So, we got this. This was one of the suggestions of our moderator and supporter on our Patreon for. He suggested that since ASVS version 4 was coming out, that we reach out to y'all and get you on. So I have made a promise to my co-hosts to not hog the time on the podcast. So let's start out by asking what ASVS does, and then we'll just go from there.
What does it do? It tries to bring some structure and rigor and normalization to the whole AppSec testing world, which is still very much at its infancy. And unfortunately, at the moment, and it's been like this for a while, when, say, an end client or a customer gets an application test, it's pretty much luck of the draw. You're not sure what you're going to get back, what the test is going to do, how experienced the tester is, what they're looking for, and vice versa. From a testing perspective, it's hard to test everything, especially if you're not using an automated tool. So what the ASVS tried to do right from the start was to say, right, here is what we expect, an application to be from a security standard. And there were 3 levels. So from the development side, we expect it to have X, Y, and Z. And then from the testing side, we expect you to look for X, Y, and Z too. And the idea is that on both sides of the field, everybody's got an idea of where they're going. And the end customer also has an idea saying, well, if I've picked a company and I say ask for an ASVS level 2 test, I know what they're supposed to be doing. So it kind of just brings a bit of a structure and, methodical way to test applications, if that makes sense.
Okay.
That kind of goes against I don't think it goes against the goals, but it says it has in the document, and this is version 4, 2 main goals: to help organizations develop and maintain secure applications is the first one. And then the second is to allow security service vendors, tools vendors, and customers to align their requirements and offerings. So yeah, the second point, but isn't the main goal to help organizations develop their applications?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. If you look at right at the start when you decide, right, I'm going to build a widget. I've decided I like cars, so I'm going to sell cars and I'm going to build an application that sells cars. You turn to what standards are available. And the idea behind the ASVS is that, hopefully somebody would look at it and go, right, what is a secure web application today? And they'd look at this, and they look at all the other standards and say, right, this is what we expect from an application. And they build that into the functional requirements. So they say, right, we have an application, you can buy cars, so therefore we're going to allow online payments and personal details. We've looked at it and we thought, okay, it should be a level 2. All right, well, what does level 2 mean? What is that kind of thing? They go into the ASVS standard, they can see, well, actually, yeah, I need to have this, this, and this. And if they put it that way right at the start of the project, and everybody understands what constitutes a secure application, as you'd expect through the life cycle, we hope, that the common things that we're still seeing in the web today, SQL injection, XSS, LFI, RFI, all that kind of stuff, technically shouldn't exist. Now, that's an ideal world. And the reality is SQL injection is now old enough to drink in America. We're not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I can understand the levels now that you'd explained it better. You need to find out what level your application needs to be at. It doesn't necessarily have to be at level 3. It could be a level 1 application, right? In which case it doesn't need those level 2 and level 3 security functionality. It's nice to have, but
yeah. So perfect example. Let's take a marketing brochure based site. Might not be based on WordPress, hopefully not, but there's very little functionality. It might be static HTML. There might be some form of input, taken from the client and pushed back to the client, but it's not critical. If it doesn't hold payment information or PI or anything else, that could be very much at level 1. Now, at the same time, from the testing perspective, we want to make level 1 as easy for the automated scanning market to incorporate that to their tools so that it becomes very easy to scan for that. It's not always a manual process, which in turn, manual testing is still very expensive and it doesn't fit into the whole shifting left, sec DevOps approach at the moment. So there's a bit of a conflict between the two sides of the industry at the moment.
It does require the marketing companies or the websites to actually know what data is being captured, right? I mean, a marketing website will often have an iframe or something that'll say, hey, we want to tell you more about our product. Put your information in here. And that may be an iframe that goes to Marketo or to, any one of the email harvesting systems. So that could easily become a level 2 kind of requirement with, how the information is being shared or what is being collected, right?
Oh, totally. And you've just touched on the point that we still struggle with in the AppSec world, is that what does my application do? Where does the data go? Where is it stored? Where it's pushed out? Who has access to it? We're still struggling with that. And you see that with all the breaches. And one of the things that we've done with version 4 is, let's start doing more threat modeling. Because the nice thing about a properly done threat model right at the start of the project is that you understand where the data is. You understand where it's going, how it's being processed. But, in 20 odd years of doing AppSec, I still see very few companies doing a threat model. And I think it was possibly because the tools just weren't usable. The Microsoft threat modeling tool was really awful. And a lot of people just saw it as a hassle. They didn't see the benefit of it. But there's been a big push recently. There's some great tools out there. Such as various risk from Continuum, that's really easy to use, and you get to see where your data is going and who has access to what. So we're hoping there's going to be a bit of a resurgence of threat modeling.
Cool.
That's a great point. I think that kind of reminded me that managers probably don't know or don't want to know what their application actually does when it comes to securing data or needing to secure data. And just for the listeners, level 1 is a low assurance levels and completely penetration testable. Level 2 is contains sensitive data basically, and level 3 is critical applications, high value transactions, that sort of thing, medical data, PCI, things like that.
So before we get started, we actually invited several folks from the ASVS team on. Jim Manico is here. He just flew in from Hawaii, of all places. I don't know why he'd want to leave, but he flew into Amsterdam. He's currently muted. I will try to unmute. He just dropped off. I think he accidentally hit the thing, but
we'll fix it in post, right?
We'll fix it in post, right? We'll wait for him to come back on, and then we'll introduce him.
By the way, Daniel, can you or do you have anything to add where management may not know or not want to know? I noticed that you said there's a lot of companies out there that still don't do the basic threat modeling.
Yeah, so it's weird. I've been a hacker for a while now, and I never thought I'd get to the stage in my career where I openly welcome regulation and legislation. And GDPR in Europe has been phenomenal because it was just too easy to throw data onto the internet and excuse the French, not give a toss about what happens to it, because you weren't going to get punished. And that started a whole movement of where people just didn't care. Like, so what if it got breached? What GDPR has done, and I've seen, is that people are now having to worry. They're having to ask those questions where they're going, what data do we store? Because the nice thing about GDPR is that it's no longer a basic fine. They fine you based on the revenue of the company.
Right.
So especially here in Europe, we're starting to see a lot more companies now take your personal data a lot more seriously. And in light of everybody suffering from breach fatigue, myself included, it's about damn time.
Right. So Jim has joined us again. There's a mute button over there on your left. Let me see if there he is.
How's it going? Hello, Daniel. Hello, Amanda.
Amanda,
hello.
I'm Brian, and that's Brian over there, but I call him Mr. Betcher. So,
Mr. Betcher, hello, sir.
Yes.
Hello.
Jim, before we continue on with threat modeling and discussion of levels 1, 2, and 3, can you tell the world about yourself a little bit?
My name is Jim Manico. I'm an application security enthusiast. I'm an educator. I primarily teach developers how to write secure code, and I do products in the Kubernetes security world. I love application security. It's my job, it's my passion, and it's my hobby. So it's something I enjoy working on a great deal.
Awesome. Okay, so one of the next questions I had is there's different ways of doing, and Daniel had mentioned this, that one of the differences between V3 and V4 was that you're trying to get people to do threat modeling. I'll go to Jim first, and we'll do Daniel. But do you have a specific camp or a specific methodology when you're doing threat modeling? Because there's the show stack method. There's I've taken a workshop from Robert Hurlbut, who's done some threat modeling. Even my carpool buddy, Dr. Cowan, who works with me at Leviathan, has a specific method by which he does, and we're actually teaching our testers on how to do threat modeling. Do you have a specific methodology, and how do you employ it at your organization?
Yeah. I think threat modeling is mostly bullshit. A lot of it's just mental debate and mental discussion, a lot of wasted time. I focus on now I think it's okay to do it. Go ahead, do your threat modeling, have your meetings, but keep my developers out of it because you're mostly wasting our time. Until you can get me down to real world requirements to write secure code, it's all mental. So I tend to be, now I'm holding a position here. It's a little bit extreme. I tend to be one of the threat modeling naysayers. What I want are clear requirements to drive technical vulnerability remediation and technical vulnerability defenses. And I think that if you're threat modeling things like SQL injection, you're wasting my time. If you're threat modeling cross-site scripting, you're wasting my time. About half of ASVS are technical controls that you should not debate. You should just do it as a core part of building software. And if you're going to do threat modeling, let's do that on business logic, advanced flow, authentication workflows, the things that are not technical controls. I've been a part of about 10 different formal threat modeling. And in half of them, they were literally threat modeling SQL injection, which again, is a waste of everybody's time. When it comes to SQL injection, please don't threat model it. Parameterize your query. Fix it as a core part of writing software. Don't debate it, do it, and let's reserve threat modeling for only things that require threat modeling. This is not a popular opinion among the threat modeling community, but that's on threat security. That's why I love
so Daniel, how about you? What's your thought on threat modeling?
So firstly, that's why I love Jim a lot. He is the Marmite and a phenomenal person. I share both. So I am still very much offensive based, and I have been that way for a long time in my career. And I do agree with Jim. A lot of times threat modeling is done as a shoe gauging type exercise, but there are some cases where you do get to see other people go, I never thought of that. I never thought of that data being hosted there, and we're not doing anything with it. Now, I don't think the threat modeling community helped themselves in the past. It was just too hard to do. Like I said, the tools were awful. There was a lot of conflicting advice, and that's why it fell out of favor. But I'm starting to use it more and more but not the full-blown ones for my dev sprints, where we're trying to look at where data is being pushed out, obviously in a multi-hybrid cloud approach, who's using what, who has access to what regulation and compliance are we, trying to deal with. So I can see both sides.
Mm-hmm. So we don't to Jim's point, we don't threat model cross-site scripting and SQL injection, at least at our organization either. We kind of go at the 1,000 or 5,000 foot level, where we're looking at individual components. It's a web server, it's an API, it's a database server, it's a user, it's an API a call or something like that. We don't actually do those individual bits. We do actually require a developer or a dev lead or something to be able to tell us how the system works, because we need a whiteboard and somebody who actually knows how the system works. Otherwise, we're just sitting here talking to managers who don't know as much. So we're not down in the weeds either with regards to that. We kind of keep it as generic as possible, because our scope of our engagements are often suggested by what we consider to be a critical component in the environment.
I'd like to make a quick nod to Daniel saying it. I think he's right. I think the techniques and tools and just the culture around threat modeling has gotten way, way better. And you cited Showstack and you cited Robert, and these are two of some of the best out there in this area. So as much as my concern has been pretty negative about threat modeling, I am being dragged into it, and I appreciate a lot of the modern work done in that area in the last couple of years. So I want to nod to that as well.
Cool.
Well, to add to that, so I'm heavily associated with Black Hat, which is very much an offensive conference. The last 2 years, we've been looking at how we get more talks and workshops in that are traditionally dev focused. And the one training workshop that does really, really well, and you'd never think so, is Seba's threat modeling workshop. And it's a whiteboard threat modeling workshop. And you think, my God, it's being done at Black Hat in Vegas full of hackers. But the reviews are phenomenal, because a lot of people go, I never thought about that. And it's weird how different approaches and just different ways of doing it have really, really become quite popular. So look, it's still early days, but yeah, hopefully we're starting to see a big wave coming.
So Jim, you mentioned that.
Wait a second. You're saying you're apply coding to picked finally, or?
Sorry, but Jim, we didn't get that last little bit there.
Broke up, Jim. You're saying how attractive I am, and I've got great hair.
You know, handsome man you are. No, I was saying, is Black considering things like secure coding talks and defensive talk in this era now? Is that what you?
Yeah, I mean, so year before last, we gave the first Sec DevOps training course at Black Hat.
Very nice. Might be something to highlight when we look up if people are interested in doing that. So something other than hack all the things. You're gonna
I can see a shift where it's become more important lately.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
Security in general to devs, because there's a really, really big dev conference right down the street from me, and the last couple of years they've really ramped up just security in general at the conference, and they have an entire track, and it's kind of coming from both directions now, which I think is nice.
Nice.
That's awesome.
All right. So you say architecture is not an implementation, but a way of thinking about a problem that has potentially many different answers and no one single correct answer. I think that's fairly correct. You all mentioned in version 4, you mentioned if everybody used SAML, then we would have no worries about what to secure. But unfortunately, not everybody uses SAML or for authentication purposes, and it's not feasible in some organizations.
Well, keep in mind, SAML is not really authentication. That's more federation. That's the real use case in SAML, and it's still a pretty good protocol. It's just that it doesn't play well in the modern world of the web. It doesn't play well in the federated environment that we see across multiple websites. So OpenID Connect has really taken over the role that SAML used to play.
So we asked Daniel earlier about what the biggest differences between ASVS v3 and v4 was. He said it was the threat modeling. Is there any other, Jim, any other differences that you see there with regards to any other bigger differences there between the v3 and v4?
Well, what I think is the refinement of the actual requirements is extremely powerful. We had a lot more participation. There was a lot more scrutiny of each individual requirement. We brought NIST 863B into the party to rethink all of authentication, which I think was powerful. And it's just like ASVS 3, I think, was good, but a lot of the requirements didn't get enough debate. And we got that debate this time. You can look at all the debate over GitHub, and I feel we did a good job of embracing everybody's comments. We didn't care who gave it. We really took all of the individual requirement discussion seriously, and I think that level of refinement shows in the depth. And I think that's just going to continue as we go to 5 in a couple of years, because being able to discuss in a concise way what developers or even testers should do. We debated individual sentences for days, and I think that's helpful when you're trying to build a standard. So the refinement of the individual 200 or so requirements is what I'm personally most excited about. When I take ASVS and I use it in my work, I remove the top, remove the bottom, just grab the requirements and fork them with individual teams so they have a clear, secure coding standard for their individual project. That's my personal use case of ASVS.
Mm-hmm. I'm with Jim there. So it's not just the threat modeling. What we tried to do with 4 was make it a lot more usable. There's no point having a standard which nobody can use, because then it's just mental masturbation by the people writing the standard to say, look, I've done a standard, but nobody uses it. If you look at the flow of 4, and it's not perfect, there's still a lot of issues, the community was phenomenal. Literally, I couldn't gush enough about the people who gave up their time to go through and just say, that statement doesn't make sense, or we should rewrite it like this, or have you thought of this? And it really does show with everything there. It's just a lot more polished.
Mm-hmm. I agree, Daniel. And I think even more important, if you look at the history of ASVS, the first version was written by 3 people in a closed room, and someone had to get it started. That's great. And as ASVS went to 2 and 3, each tier up involved more community. And ASVS 4 was just flat out open, transparent. Every discussion was on GitHub. Anybody could jump in and comment. As a side note, OWASP Top 10 went through the same migration. The early versions of OWASP Top 10, that was a couple people who made those calls. And that has a global impact on security. If you look at what happened to OWASP Top 10 now, it's been taken over by a new group, 4 different people, 4 different companies. It's all on GitHub. So the level of transparency we see at these crucial OWASP projects, especially ASVS 4, big impact on quality and integrity, I think.
Cool. So I'm looking down the document here. It says version 1.5. It says in 4.0 we were moved away from the term server side as a loaded trust boundary term. Why? What was the decision in that? I'll go to either Daniel or Jim.
Well, here's an interesting note, right? If you're into the OAuth protocol, I just got back from the security working group in Stuttgart in Germany, and they use the term client a lot. What about the OAuth client? Well, that could mean a server, that could mean a mobile app, that could mean a native app, that could mean a background process, that could mean your web browser. So, what a server is and what a client is in the modern era, these terms are way loaded. So I don't know why the actual decision was made, but I can understand it as we look at modern standards and look at how they cite these core terms, and they're mixed up. Like if I use the term web client, what does that mean to you? That means to me a browser, but to the OAuth standard, it means a web server because it's a client to another authorization server. So things are getting complex. So when we throw these terms around, we can't just say server. We should be clarifying really specifically what we're talking about.
Okay.
I'm with Jim. I'm blonde. I get confused very easily. I think if you go back to the very early days of the web, it made total sense. But in 2019, no, you just don't stand a chance. Like, what is server side? No.
Do you worry that going away from the term server side would confuse people?
No, I think web AppSec is still very hard and confuses a lot of people. But I don't think this would, generally cause a lot of confusion. That's my gut feeling.
I don't think so either. And if you look at any individual requirement and feel it's lacking because we're not using the term server side, then we're file a GitHub issue and we'll reconsider it. But as of right now, I don't think the lack of the term server side harms any of the current requirements in terms of clarity.
All right. Sounds fair. Okay. Ms. Berlin, you must be brimming with questions.
You asked the only one that I was going to ask. So,
I'll go.
Another one. Yeah, go ahead.
Now it says there's a section called assessment and certification. Now, have many organizations gotten ASVS certified for their applications? And what credence does it give them?
Now, let's talk about that for a second. I think this is really important because I don't think that part of ASVS is very important. I don't think people going out there getting ASVS certified is really what we're trying to do with ASVS. We cite it as a standard. It's used as a standard. We claim it's a standard, but that's just words. What I really think ASVS is best used for is let's fork let's use ASVS as a base of clear web security requirements for web and API development. There's a core. And I want everyone who's using it to fork it specific for their company and have their own personal list. They may not want 20 authentication requirements. They may want 2 specific to the authentication service they've built in their company already and how to use it properly. So yes, there is a community that uses it to certify apps. But I think that's the least interesting and least important part of ASVS. Again, ASVS should be a core requirement list that every organization forks individually for their group. And this is something the ASVS talks about as well. You'll see that in the ASVS introduction. So I almost want to dismiss your question arrogantly, and I apologize for that.
Well said.
I think leaning on that's harmful.
Is that the feeling of all the project leads or the contributors as well?
It wouldn't be appropriate for me to speak for everyone, but the answer is yes, of course.
What he said.
Excellent.
What he said.
Yeah, because this just struck me as, wait a minute, certification. Yeah, good point.
Small community that's into that. And I respect them. I wish them well, but my eyes on other use cases of ASVS.
So one of the things I just thought of here is how many people actually had input. You said there was a GitHub. You had this open, RFC kind of deal. Was there any industry-based people who were giving their input on this, say the Googles or the Vericodes or the Sonatypes of the world that are like, oh yeah, it'd be nice if you could, do SAS and DAST and all this stuff, and oh yeah, we also have a product. Did you get any kind of interference from the industry folks?
I never got interference, but there were literally like hundreds of people that provided comments. It was almost too much. And we were days away from trying to seal it. And then someone shows up with 30 comments. So we didn't track the individual people and what organization they came from. Very often people's GitHub account is under their personal email address. So, but we didn't care if you had an intelligent comment, we addressed it and without even knowing or looking into who the people were. In fact, several really core contributors were anonymous. They just came in with a obfuscated GitHub account that didn't link to them in any way, that was an empty account, and provided tons of feedback that was intelligent. So I would like to see input from the Vericodes and the DAST and SAS industry and the big consulting firms. And I know that lots of our contributors and commenters were from the industry. We just didn't track that. And to some degree, we didn't care. You give us a good comment, we're going to take it seriously and make sure it's included in the process in some way. But this is an overwhelming topic. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Amanda.
No, that's right. And I'm sure some of those, like hidden GitHub accounts or whatever are from those, main companies in the industry. They're just maybe, everybody has, reasons coming down from corporate that they're not allowed to like officially speak for on behalf of the company. And, I assume that might be some of the reason why some of them are anonymous, but.
Yeah, probably. So on my side, I was abusing a lot of these companies because I know quite a few of the founders and such, and saying like, what are you going to be doing in your automated tools to be more, receptive to ASVS? So Chris from Veracode and Daph from Burp, etc. And the conversations are ongoing because I think that's what helps people. Just running a web app scanner. And to go back to the certification thing, there are still some industries that desperately require certification, especially those in the financial services and government. And that's where it kind of helps. You can say, right, okay, you can be, and I'm using the term certified in air quotes here, you can be certified to be tested and built against a level 2. And it gives everybody a warm and fuzzy feeling. And then on the flip side, you say something like Veracode or Q1 or whoever, right, can you at least offer a level 1 automated scan? In your product roadmap type thing. So there's a lot of discussion going on, but yeah, I think a lot of the anonymous comments were from people in the industry.
Right.
And can you imagine being a DAS scanner company, worth $500 million to $1 billion, already dealing with the challenges of being a product company, and then some nonprofit group releases a standard that tells you how to enhance your tool. So, we don't. A lot of the tool vendors aren't always happy to have their hand forced, but that's what we're trying to do in a respectful way. We're trying to raise the bar and add more consistency to how people approach assessment, have a common definition for how to approach assessment. But I feel for the product companies. It's not always easy to take our advice and just roll with it.
No, I personally would rather get it from the nonprofit just because you don't want a standard like that coming from somebody that wants to make money off of it.
Yeah, I believe that the people who are in charge of AS, the 5 of us who are the project leaders, I do this because I got asked to and I'm interested in it. And I believe Andrew is the same way. I know Daniel is the same way. So I think that we have Josh Grossman just jumped in and provided prolific level of help and support this year. And he was made a project leader because of his work this year. I know the 5 of us pretty well, and we're just fanatical about this. We're just into the topic. It's our hobby. It's right. It's our passion. And we feel that we can contribute something that will help everybody write more secure code. So I feel really good about this group and what our intentions are behind doing this. And if a few people who are volunteers showed up, they obviously had an agenda in terms of what they were suggesting, but it was an intelligent agenda. They were intelligent suggestions. So everyone's got an agenda. I don't care what your agenda is. If it's intelligent, if it's going to help people write more secure software, if it's a reasonable requirement, then we're going to include it in some way.
Right.
You mentioned raising the bar, and I'm looking at the section on passwords. Every one of these
here we go.
Has level.
Beautiful.
Every one of these has level 1, and one in particular stands out.
Bring it.
Verify that Unicode characters are permitted, right? So emojis. I mean, that's a
emoji. Heck, about 6 months ago, one of the top banks had their entire system go down across the entire bank. You know why? Because someone used an emoji in a security question for the first time, and their old mainframe couldn't handle it, and the whole organization choked. So here's what it comes down to. People have emoji on their keyboards, and if you don't support it, you're not building good software. End of story. But if you have a different opinion, I'm eager to hear it.
The password thing, my God, it frustrates me like you wouldn't believe.
It's so beautiful.
We've had, Bill's advice from NIST in, 2003, where he came about with the whole complexity stuff.
Yep.
And that was the Bible for so many people. Yep. And I've had fights with audit who say to me, somebody who is very offensive in his nature of his career, who cracks passwords and does all that stuff, telling me that my 4-word passphrase is incredibly weak. And you almost want to beat them. Totally. Try and crack that.
Trivial.
Really?
Hashcat. You're talking about XKCDs, like horse battery staple pattern.
Yep.
That's garbage. That's a garbage policy. There are specific hashcat attack patterns that will walk through 4-word patterns from the most common word dictionary, making that a very crackable pattern. I don't see it as 4 words.
Who said I'm using English?
What's that?
Who says I'm using English?
Now you're doing good. If you're using non-standard vocab for your 4 words, you're in a better place. But keep in mind, XKCD, you're citing a very famous comic, horse battery staple pattern. That did a disservice to password storage. I'm sorry, we're fighting here. We're arguing. We're on the same team, Daniel. Even though I'm right, I'm going to shut up now, Daniel. I'm sorry.
No. My point was, we still enforce these silly password requirements that frustrate the crap out of everybody. We have password fatigue. We have it being impossible to type really funny characters on a mobile phone. And that's what most people use today. And they're still not using password managers. And the whole password guidance advice in the industry just hasn't moved. It's still stuck in 2005. But then you have NIST and you have GCHQs, NCSC pushing out solid advice, and yet companies still refuse to use it. They're still forcing these forced password resets, uppercase, lowercase number, special character crap, and it's just not helping people.
I agree, Daniel. The 4-word thing, we'll debate that a different time, but I especially love NIST 863B's advice on passwords. It changed everything. It really did. From uppercase, lowercase number, special character to drop all those rules, 8-character or larger passwords. I prefer 12. That's why we changed it. Other people did as well. I mean, not me. That was Andrew who made that call. But stop credential stuffing. Don't allow common passwords. Handle brute force attacks. So how the password policy evolved and how we dovetailed off in this 863, we don't care about the raw math. We care about how attackers are actually going after passwords in the real world today once that stuff is stolen. And it's a very different threat landscape of how authentication password systems are attacked compared to what we saw, a decade ago. So this freaked a lot of people out, really freaked people out when they saw 863B.
With cloud now, Amazon, AWS, you have to care about the math too. It's just not the sole thing you need to focus on.
We always have to care about math. You're right. I'm sorry. We do have to care about math. I guess my point is that when we use these patterns, uppercase, lowercase number, special character, that puts you in a really common password topography. And we see some of these cracking engines will just look for passwords with those particular patterns. It does us a disservice. It's not the right pattern to build the best passwords, right? Because even if you have really complex passwords, people reuse them across multiple sites. Those site passwords get reused. One site gets hacked, DrocU gets hacked. That password gets leaked, and now we have a username password we can try in different services as an attacker and pop some accounts. That's not math. That's just bad user behavior and password reuse. And this is something that wasn't considered in the past that is now needs to be considered in an authentication system. That's what I mean by it's not just the math. There's other threat-specific factors that have been included into password policy that were not there in the past that are very important.
Going back to the requirement of emojis and things, it's just so frustrating when you come up with when you generate a 32-character password and the rule is, you can't have a $sign, sorry. So then you got to manually go change that. You can't have a £sign. Things like that are just so frustrating. And just allow, I'm totally on board. Just allow anything that a user can actually type and accept that as their password.
As long as they're escaping that correctly.
Right.
Because that's why they're getting rid of and allowing only certain characters, right? Because they don't want to have any kind of, cross-site scripting or SQL injection or whatever being used in their password fields. That's at least my understanding. I could be wrong.
No, you're exactly right. And this is craziness. This is what this bank, any bank who does not let you use any possible printable character, what they're saying is, we don't feel confident in our ability to write SQL injection protected queries. We don't feel confident in being able to stop cross-site scripting. We don't feel confident that the third-party software chain that we're using is immune to injection and similar. So we're going to rip out characters of your password policy that are not going to be possible for injection, even though you should never put a raw password into a SQL statement or a user interface. That's a whole separate note, but we're still going to rip this stuff out. And this is a sign of insecurity. This is a sign of weak software, and it's something that ASVS directly addressed.
Yep. Ms. Berlin, you had a question?
Yeah, some of these are from Slack and David, I think. So this is kind of going off the topic, but onto like the IoT stuff that's included. So I was reading a little bit about it, and it says like there's the whole OWASP IoT security standard, but then there's also the Appendix C added to the end. So one of the questions is, well, why was this added? And it says these controls are in addition to all the other ASV controls. So I'm assuming it's just a little bit of overlap, right?
Well, so I kind of caused a lot of havoc here. I wanted it taken out, mostly because, one, IoT is still very hard. And I didn't feel that what we had in there was very good. And also, there is a great project from OWASP already, the OWASP IoT project. Mm-hmm. And we didn't want the ASVS to become the standard for everything, because then, like I go back to my original thing, a standard has to be usable. So we didn't want to be an ASVS for IoT, SCADA, mobile, APIs, every minute, because then it becomes really hard to maintain. And with everything like that, you start to lose your readership. So I looked at what was on offer, and I looked at the separate Internet of Things project. I thought, this doesn't make sense. Let's rather reference their work, because their work's really good, and go from there, rather than trying to add everything in.
Okay.
And Amanda, I was one of the volunteers who went out to the IoT team and got them to contribute to the IoT section to ASVS. And I was probably the last holdout. I was unhappy that we were going to remove their contribution, but Daniel was right. He was spot on. It didn't fit the flow. It was overreaching, and there's already great existing work being done. So we just pointed to that. So Daniel had to drag me kicking and screaming, but yeah, he was definitely right.
So were you working with Aaron Guzman and them over there on the IoT? Because we actually did a 2-part show with them earlier this year about the IoT top 10, because we may or may not be doing some stuff with IoT platform developers at our company. And when we saw this come out, the first thing I told my folks at our office was, this is going to be the new standard that people are going to follow, regardless of what other standards are being out there, because OWASP top 10, is like the de facto standard for web apps. This is going to be the de facto standard for IoT top 10, being the IoT top 10. And I can understand why you guys wouldn't want to add all of this and be like the kitchen sink, standard. So that makes complete sense. But yeah, there's a lot that overlaps here with this. I mean, a lot of IoTs have web apps. A lot of IoT have, password issues. A lot of them have, additional communications aside. But I see a lot of overlap on this and the IoT standards.
Oh, absolutely. Just keep in mind, like the ASVS is really the WASVS. It's the web security ASVS. There's also that massive mobile ASVS. And IoT is even though there's tons of overlap with both mobile and with web, IoT is a special puppy. You have low resource devices and very unique deployment environments that requires a specialized set of standards. We're also addressing with IoT a very different audience. Usually when we're dealing with web developers, we're dealing with enterprise development. When we're dealing with IoT, it's a very different kind of developer, closer to the hardware, closer to the specific platform. And I think Aaron Gutzman's the one, and Daniel Miesler are the ones who provided the IoT for ASVS that we ended up dropping because their work is so mature. Aaron Gutzman is amazing. He goes and gives talks to the FTC. Miesler is one of the top brains in machine learning, and he's a great intellectual about this stuff. So their work stands by itself. They don't need us to copy it. We can just point to them, and I think that's enough for this phase. But you're right, tons of overlap. Absolutely.
And that was it for part one of our discussion with Jim Manico and Daniel Cuthbert on OWASP ASVS version 4. Have a few announcements before we go. Workshop Con is giving some training out. If you're interested in and you live in the Northeast or you're able to make it to Boston, the SpectrOps folks are doing an adversary tactics red team operations training from June 4th to June 7th, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. all 3 days, or 3 days, yeah. And practical web application pen testing with Tim Tomes is going on as well during the same time from June 5th to June 7th from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. And, sounds like a good way of learning some new skills if you're interested in either one of those. So you can go to workshopcon.com and get some tickets or sign up if you'd like to do the training. My friend Rob Shane also does a conference, which is ironically enough in Boston as well. It's going to be a Source Conference. So he's going to be doing that from the 29th of April to the 3rd of May this year. Training's actually happening April 29th and April 30th, and the conference is the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of May. So if you're interested in learning a little bit about various people in the InfoSec industry, or how to be a better leader, or you want to work on your your blue team and your red team skills, there's more than enough ways to do that with those two conferences. With Rob's conference, you can go to sourceconference.com/events/Boston19, and then you can get a ticket or two. All right, so you can join our Slack. Brakesec has a Slack. It's very active. We've got a lot of people on there, a lot of good information being passed around. We have a sim club that meets regularly. We have a book club that meets twice a week, one for our European and Asian folks and one for our US-based folks. Or you can meet, it's on Saturday mornings for the European and Asia Pacific folks. So if you're in the US and you want to join on Saturday mornings, you can do that. You can join our Slack by emailing either bds.podcast@gmail.com, or you can send a Twitter DM to @Brakesec, which is also the official Twitter handle of our podcast. So for for the people who are on this episode, Daniel Cuthbert, he's on Twitter. You can find him at D as in dog, Cuthbert, Cuthbert, and you can find Jim Manicode on Twitter as well at Manicode, MANICODE. And okay, so for the hosts, Mr. Betcher can be found at BetcherPwned on Twitter, BOETTCHERPWNED, and he's also the lead developer of a program called LogMD, which allows you to do some forensic analysis of your Windows boxes, find out what you've are logging or not logging, and it's a nice method by helping you detect what you may be missing in your environment. So if you're interested in doing that, you can go to log-md.com, or you can follow them on Twitter at log_MD. Ms. Berlin can be found at InfoSystir, INFOSYSTIR, and she has an organization called Hackers Health, which is dedicated to helping people in InfoSec understand how, their anxiety, how to cope with anxiety or nervousness or, imposter syndrome or things that affect us from a health point of view. And she does villages, she does at conferences. She also has a store. If you're interested in finding out more about her, you can also go to Hackers Health on Twitter, which is Hackers, HACKERS, Health, HEALTH. And finally, you can follow me, Brian Brake, on Twitter at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. And I'd like to thank all of our patrons. For those of you who don't know, this is a weekly podcast. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make this possible, and we're currently listener supported. So if you are interested in helping out, giving something a little bit, maybe you got a little, maybe you got value from this podcast or one of the other 270 odd podcasts that we've done over the past 5 years, you can leave us a couple of bucks on Patreon, or if you don't like Patreon, you can send us some money on PayPal. So you can go to brakesec.com/BDS Patreon, or you can send us some money on PayPal at brakesec.com/PayPal BDS. And, barring that, let's say you want to get a t-shirt or a coffee cup or some stickers printed out or something like that. We have a TPub store where you can go and get all those kinds of things. You can even, get a t-shirt and show your support for the podcast. And we get a little kickback for that. If you don't want to do a Patreon, we get a couple of bucks back for every t-shirt that gets sold. So you can go to brakesec.com/store and help out. So we'll be back next week with part 2 of this conversation we're having with Jim and Daniel. It's something that I'm finding very interesting, and I'm glad that it's there, because it's definitely spawned other topics that we'll bring up in the coming weeks. So if you've got some feedback on what we've talked about here, I'd love to hear it. So you can hit us up on email or Twitter and join the Slack. So that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Please be nice to one another. Take care of yourselves, because you're the only you have. And we will talk to you again soon.